Welcome everyone to the session today. We have a number of members, guests, as well as sponsors attending today, and I thank everyone for their participation. Before I move forward with introducing our speaker, I wanted to send out a special thanks to RPG for providing the content and Andy for today's presentation. But a quick roll-up of our upcoming activities. We have a dog bar event on March 11th. This is our first return to in-person events for the Tampa Bay chapter since literally almost a year since our last in-person event. So we're very excited about it. We would love it if members please do take the time to sign up for the event, and it's going to be quite interesting. Fred Metzler is going to be speaking about the dog bar and some of the unique challenges that they had associated with bringing the concept to Florida, some of the different liability issues associated with that type of venue, and then how they powered through the COVID related challenges. So that should be very interesting. One of the fun caveats to that event is that you're going to be able to bring your dogs if you have them, but please be sure to read the requirements on the dog bar rulings on who can attend, and there's age restrictions on pets. They have to be a certain age, etc. So I'm very excited about that event and looking forward to seeing everyone in person for the first time in quite some time. It's a large outdoor venue, so we do believe that it should be a comfortable environment for everyone. For those of you that perhaps aren't comfortable returning to in-person events at this point in time, we are continuing to schedule content around online opportunities for presentations, and the next upcoming opportunity will be April 23rd, and that should be quite interesting. It's the positive psychology and well-being in the workplace. Excuse me. Other events that we already have on the calendar are the Clays event for September 24th. That's our charity event for the year, and we're very excited to have reserved a spot. So that is a Friday, and I hope everyone will take the time to get signed up in advance of that event as soon as Denise gets it posted on the website. In addition to that, we've locked in the date for our holiday party on 12/1, so please do put that on your calendars. It'll be an after-work event, as it has been historically, and we're very excited to return to that event. It's always been one of our biggest events of the year, and it should be just lovely. Before I introduce our speaker, I just wanted to remind you that if you have any questions for Andy, to put the questions in the chat, and we will take time to answer those questions hopefully at the end of the meeting. And if you want continuing education for this hour, you do need to answer the rolling questions that come up to the screen for credit. So for Andy, I wanted to introduce you, and Andy is the Vice President of Advisory and Project Services for RPG. He's got an interesting topic for us today, using RPA to automate F&A processes. Robotic process automation, I think, is endlessly fascinating. So we're all looking forward to hearing his presentation. And on that happy note, I'll let Andy tell you a little bit about himself and commence with the presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Good day, everyone. Andy Jones. I am the leader of our finance transformation and robotic automation practice globally for RGP. My background is an interesting mix of systems and business process improvement. I did a little bit of supply chain and the like, and then came to RGP about 4 years ago, and have had the pleasure of surrounding myself with some really brilliant people who help organizations transform their finance and accounting processes and function to be more efficient and effective, leveraging technology wherever they can. And while we're going to focus today on RPA, you'll hear right off, as you can see on the agenda, we'll talk about a few different technologies and how they can come into play when you embark upon your automation journey. Just a quick overview of RGP. We're about a 4,000 person professional services firm, global consultancy. We differentiate ourselves by primarily by having seasoned professionals, people that have been out there with 10 to 20 years of professional experience, many with big consulting. Our clients love us. Not everybody's heard of us, but those that know us seem to love us. We have great retention rates and have worked with about 86 of the Fortune 100 in the past year, serving clients all around the world in a wide range of needs, including finance and accounting, risk and compliance, tech and digital, and business transformation. Today, we'll concentrate on two of those areas, and that's really the finance and accounting and tech and digital. So without further ado, I'm going to kick into the presentation. As mentioned, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I've left room at the end of our time together to address your questions. I'm going to start off by asking you a question. We're going to start off with a polling question. Polling question number one, and again, you'll need to answer these if you want to get your CPE credit. I'm really interested to hear how automated your current finance and accounting practices are. So if you will take the next 10, 15 seconds to chime in and answer, let us know how you, where you are on the automation spectrum. Very eager to see the responses here. I'm going to close out the polling and it's time to share the results. So it looks like a lot of you are on the pretty manual side of things. You're about a third of you say most of your processes are manual and you're heavily dependent upon Excel. About half say you've automated some of the transactional work, but you still have a lot of manual work. That's not surprising. In some markets, I see more people with higher degrees of automation. It sounds like this is the perfect group to have this talk today because there's no reason why you shouldn't be automating today. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can use these technologies to do so. So with that, I'm going to move forward. Bear with me a moment. My polling screen is in the way of my button to advance the screen. Pardon me. Sorry. So with that, let's talk a little bit about what is finance transformation and what does it mean to us? Because if we can't talk about how to automate it if we're not all on the same page about what finance transformation is. And I will tell you that many consultancies will pick very big picture, revolutionary finance transformation. And certainly my colleagues are quite capable of leading those kinds of global finance transformation efforts. Again, very revolutionary in nature. Some finance transformation efforts are more evolutionary, and it really depends on your organizational culture and the competitive market that you're in as to how quickly you need to transform in order to survive and thrive. But the basic underlying tenets here is that, in my opinion, the CFOs and the people within the CFO umbrella of the organization are being asked to do the traditional more with less, and you're being asked to provide insights into the business that may extend beyond the realm of just finance information. And as such, you're challenged to manage those costs and then look forward into the future and show the organization where it needs to invest. And a lot of finance transformation is all about that. A fundamental change in how your finance function operates. How can you reduce cost or increase capacity? How do you improve the accuracy of the data that you're doing and accelerate your ability to report? I have many clients that prior to getting involved with them, they might have a close process that was measured in terms of weeks as opposed to in terms of days. And the longer it takes them to close the books, the less time they have to analyze that information and to really provide insights to their management and their investors as far as what's driving the business. So accelerating reporting is certainly an important tenet. Achieving efficiency and creating organizational agility, I think, is key. I need to know ahead of time. I need to have predictive analytics so that I can understand where the business is headed. And I need the information so that I can make good decisions, not based just solely on historical financial data, but I need to be able to bring in third-party data and look at other macroeconomic factors to figure out how I'm going to drive the business. How do we do this? Well, we standardize process. A lot of what my team does is standardize process, streamline process, put in centers of excellence around important business processes such as the record to report process, the order to cash process, and the like. In some cases, you may try to use some form of labor arbitrage to achieve cost efficiency by offshoring your work to places where labor may be less expensive. Or you may be looking to bring back business that's been offshored or outsourced in the past, and you can leverage technology in order to do that. And we're going to talk about some of these enablers today, all the way from, ensuring you have good processes in place and good controls in place. How do you ensure that you adapt the right technologies, that you're using the appropriate technology for what you're trying to achieve? And then how do you ensure that your employees are adopting these technologies, using these processes the way that they're intended, so you get the full benefit out of the change we're talking about? I look at priorities as in this year and the years coming, and generally speaking, when I meet with finance executives, I'll have a short session with them just to find out a little bit about what's driving their business imperatives. And a lot of times it's about controlling cost and achieving productivity. But more and more, I'm finding finance executives saying, it's not just about that cost control and the efficiency that I might have done 10 years ago. It really is driving insight through the use of data and analytics, understanding what are my threats that might not be obvious to my business, and how do I counter them? Where do I invest? And how do I add value throughout the organization, helping act as a business advisor to business unit leaders and functional leads to help them understand the financial impacts of their decisions and how other factors will impact the way their business performs. We're going to go into a second polling question. Again, these polling questions are required for your CPE credit. I'd love to hear a little bit about where your primary focus is. Is your organization still focused on controlling costs, or are you now more focused on providing insight, or are you kind of balanced between the two? If you will, share where you are. And again, we'll give you a few seconds to make sure that you respond to get your CPE credit and share your insight. Couple more seconds here. Okay, a couple of you haven't responded. All right, I think we're gonna go ahead and share the results. The good news is it looks like we have a very healthy balance here. About 70% of you say that you have a good balance between cost control and delivering insight. I'm pleased to see that. Many organizations are still stuck in that cost control mode, and I'm pleased to hear that. We'll talk just a little bit more about that, and then I promise we're going to get into talking about the role that automation plays in all this. So, as I mentioned, what I'm really seeing and working with different clients is a real shift. And there's a few shifts going on. Part of it is this shift that we talked about before in trying to not be just focused on efficiencies within the organization, but providing insights. We're seeing shifts in the dynamics, the three key dynamics that we look at as we help clients transform. One of which are the people, the people that are performing the work and the nature of the work that they're doing. The studies will show that those that are coming out of undergraduate school with degrees in finance and accounting are not very interested in doing transactional work. And if organizations that are trying to attract them really need to change their posture toward technology, the people that are graduating today are digitally native. They were born essentially with devices in their hands and have always had a computer at their access. And so they don't understand organizations that spend too much time laboring with manual processes. the people in the millennial generation are very much wanting to contribute to their organization to provide that kind of insight. There's a number of great studies on the future of work that I'm more than happy to share afterward with you, that show that organizations that are going to thrive in the future are going to have to attract the best and brightest that are coming out of the schools today, to attract and to retain them. We're going to, throughout any transformation, we're going to focus on process for sure. We're going to look to standardize process the best we can. It's easier to automate a standardized process than it is one that lacks standardization. Anytime that we can centralize the control of that process, we can stabilize the process and look toward continuous process improvement. And again, we'll talk about re-engineering processes so that we can adapt these various technologies that we have that help us automate transactional and non-transactional work within the finance and accounting group. Part of what we'll do as part of a transformation effort is really look at that technology landscape and look to rationalize as much as we can, retire legacy systems that have kind of no longer serving their purpose, or at least minimizing their role, and looking toward more advanced cloud technologies that embrace shared data, that automation, lend themselves to artificial intelligence and machine learning rules engines and things like that, so that we can really think transformatively. One thing that I like to point out is that while we're going to focus a lot today on RPA, there are a lot of different technologies at our disposal as we as finance and accounting professionals look to transform our organizations. If you have an ERP, look there first. If you can automate something using your ERP system, and again, there's some of these systems are listed for illustrative purposes below. But if your ERP can help you automate, get your automation there. If not, there's a number of purpose-built platforms that can also help in achieving close efficiency, like Blackline, or your EPM space like a OneStream. So keep these in mind. If you can use the automation technology within purpose-built platforms, do that. If you have workflow tools available to you, we want to make sure that we're using those. And my team is called on more and more to help do analytic process automation with tools like Alteryx, where we're pulling in blending data from a wide range of sources to analyze and use it in conjunction with workflow. And then, of course, RPA. How do you leverage robotic process automation to automate repetitive rules-based tasks within the finance and accounting realm? I don't necessarily always go linearly from left to right as we consider technologies, but the real message is to make sure that you're looking to tackle the problem the way it should be tackled. Don't just assume that because you can automate something with RPA, for example, that you should automate it with RPA. I'm going to move into the third of our 5 polling questions. What form of automation are you using today in your enterprise? Virtually none, and maybe some Excel macros, or are you automating with a wide range of these tools? And again, look for answer G there at the bottom if you're using multiple forms of automation within your organization. Eager to see this. Couple more seconds left. All right, so let's share the results. It looks like almost half of you are using 2 or more of the above technologies, with virtually none in a strong second place, which is unfortunate. Some ERP automation and the like. Only about 7% of you using RPA, and very few using analytic process automation. So let's jump into, well, how could you kickstart? What can you do with RPA, and how can you kickstart an automation program within your organization? First of all, we're going to talk a little bit about what is RPA, and there's a lot of people don't always understand it. It's not the greatest term in the world. Robots, a lot of people assume that we're talking about physical robots. No, we're not talking about physical robots. We're talking about a software layer that can work with your existing systems to mimic at their basic level, they mimic human interaction with computers. They can replicate mouse clicks. They can read information off screens. They can query systems. They can reach out to websites or file servers and pull down information. They can also push information and input information into these systems. And again, the focus on RPA at its most basic level is it's replicating human behavior, but you're essentially offloading the work that it's taking humans maybe hours to do today, and you're offloading this work to a digital assistant that not only is a lower paid employee, but is able to do the work dramatically faster and is willing to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Where I think RPA becomes really interesting and transformational is when your processes are optimized for what we call the robot way of doing the work. So while humans may grab transactions one at a time and maybe put them into a table and then maybe perform a pivot table and then filter that data and have a very prescribed way of working, when the digital worker is performing the work, you can really transform the nature of how the work is done, so it's done much more efficiently. You may query the system once and pull down 1 million records at once and then have the robot work through them. So one of the things that we'll talk about quite a bit over the course of the next few minutes is that robot way of thinking, really changing the nature of the work. It doesn't necessarily require a huge process overhaul, but it does require a change in your thinking. And as you're designing effective automations, you want to make sure that you don't get caught up in just replicating click for click actions that the humans are taking today. So one question I get asked a lot is why use RPA versus other forms of automation, especially when I said, RPA is not always the perfect fit for what you're trying to do within an organization. Well, one of the main drivers that I hear often is that there's a big IT backlog. And in other words, you and your group want to automate a process within the accounting department, say, and you go to your partners in IT and say, hey, I want to automate this. And then they come back and say, well, it's going to take 4 months. And by the way, it's number 67 on our list of priorities, so we'll probably get to it in 2024. RPA was really conceived as a technology that could be driven by business users and implemented within an IT governance platform, but implemented by business users or consultancies working in tandem with business users and not necessarily get hung up in the IT queue. Speed. Many automations can be knocked out in hours, days, or weeks, as opposed to, like completely transforming your ERP and doing radical changes on large systems. I think about, RPA is adopting that agile mindset of everything being done in short sprints, where you start with something that adds value and then you build around that. And RPA is incredibly versatile. You can do it for so much. Like I said, there's almost any time when somebody comes to me and says, can I do this with RPA? The answer is usually a yes, you can do it with RPA. The bigger question, again, is whether you should do it with RPA. But it's incredibly versatile because it can interact with your keyboard, it can interact with the servers, it can also use APIs and things like that if a given application has an API. If an application doesn't have an API, then you can use the user interface, for example. So again, as I mentioned a moment ago, one of the things that I often hear is when people hear robotic process automation or robots, software robots, is, boy, this sounds like a lot about artificial intelligence. Is this artificial intelligence? So I like to set the stage for the differences and where RPA and technologies like machine learning and artificial intelligence converge. Things like desktop automation, robotic process automation are very process or task driven. If you've got a repetitive rules-based task, you can teach the robot to do the task over and over and over again. And we'll talk about what kinds of tasks that we should look for. But they're really driven by the consistency of that process. When we talk about machine learning or artificial intelligence, those models are typically focused on the amount of data. I have, terabytes worth of data that show me transaction history over this kind of client base. And therefore I can use algorithms to determine which of my clients, are going to be good buyers going forward. They're heavily dependent upon data. They are not necessarily as dependent upon process. They can work in a world that's a little bit more nebulous, where these algorithms can spot patterns that we as a human might not be able to fully codify or spot ourselves. What I think is really fascinating, what's happening now, is there's a convergence between these platforms. So RPA, while it is an artificial intelligence and machine learning, all the major RPA platforms are building in hooks to machine learning and artificial intelligence platforms so that they can be easily adopted. You can have a robot that interacts with the computer, and it also is making a call to, say, IBM Watson or Amazon Web Services or something else that's out there to take advantage of those technologies without necessarily having to embed that technology within your technology stack. You can really kind of rent it on the fly. And I think over time, the RPA vendors and the AI vendors, if they don't form tighter partnerships, there'll be a lot of acquisition and merger activity in the coming years as this happens. As I mentioned before, bots interact with systems just as humans do, only better. They can interact with your ERP systems, and it really doesn't matter. I've listed a few up at the top here. It really doesn't matter which your system is. Chances are RPA can interact with your ERP. They can interact with your Office suite or Google Docs and the G Suite, just about any kind of database platform that's out there. Websites, they can grab information from websites. They can file your tax return on a website. They can create a dashboard for you and the team to see where you stand on various metrics. They're getting better and better at working at unstructured and semi-structured data. Originally, I would have told you 3 years ago, I would have said, let's focus on structured data for bots. But now, because of the convergence of machine learning and artificial intelligence, we're now seeing the ability for these bots to really thrive in a world with semi-structured and unstructured data. They can operate in the cloud. They can push data to the cloud. They can pull data from the cloud. I'm doing an implementation right now for a client that has RPA on-prem, but they wanted a cloud and enterprise cloud solution that enables them to automate period end close account reconciliations in the cloud. And so we're hosting that for them. And again, don't overlook the pay-as-you-go platforms like Google AI and TensorFlow, IBM Watson, and there's a million of them out there that fill out the ecosystem in the AI and machine learning space. And to me, again, this is going to be really an area of rapid growth in the next couple of years. Where we've come just in the last couple of years, as far as going from OCR to intelligent character recognition and document recognition and machine vision, is just amazing. So organizations are really adopting RPA. If you're not using it yet, and you said only 7% of you that are on today are using RPA, I can tell you if that's the case, and maybe you're using it somewhere else in the organization. If you're not using it anywhere, you're behind the curve. You can see a statistic from McKinsey: 70% of F&A organizations have or are embracing RPA. Like now, I read another statistic, and I think it's in this deck, that shows that virtually 90% of, I think, clients or companies over 500 million in revenue will be using RPA in the coming year. It's growing like gangbusters, 30% plus annual growth rate. One of the things that I love to talk about are the benefits of RPA. And it's not just about the productivity enhancements, getting a return on your investment within 6 weeks or 6 months. I love talking about that with my clients, and my clients love us for it. Or improving quality. But one of the things I love about RPA is we see time and time again an uptick in employee satisfaction. We see this enthusiasm because employees that have been stuck doing late night reconciliations, late night number crunching, rerunning numbers, pulling numbers, sitting around waiting on reports to show up, and being able to automate their work and offload their work to digital assistants. We see huge satisfaction, customer satisfaction increases, or employee satisfaction within the customer base after deployment of RPA. I'm deploying RPA in a utility firm right now, and the more departments that get exposed to RPA, it's gone from finance and accounting into technology, into supply chain, and they're all saying, how can I get me some of that technology? What do I have to do in order to get bots in my organization? And that's all generated because of the employee satisfaction around what people have been able to do with bots. So let me ask a question. When do you think your organization will likely adopt a technology like RPA? I expect to see about 7% of you say we already have. Hopefully we'll see some adopting in 2021 or maybe next year or beyond. But please, if you will, answer the polling question. Got a healthy representation, but if you haven't answered yet, please do. Want to make sure you get your CPE credit. So fascinating. Less than 10% of you before said you weren't using RPA in finance and accounting, but it looks like 39% of you are using RPA somewhere within the organization. We got to figure out how to get that in your finance and accounting world, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the coming slides. And then about 1 out of 5 of you aren't planning to adopt RPA for the next couple of years, and that's a real shame because RPA does not require a substantial investment. Some of the technologies you can actually download for free, and you only have to start paying for them when you put them into production. So there's not a huge investment threshold that you're going to have to overcome in order to do this. So let's see if we can generate some enthusiasm with the time that we have remaining, help y'all build your business case for moving forward with RPA. As I mentioned a moment ago, about 90% of large organizations will have adopted some form of RPA by the end of next year. And this is straight out of Gartner about 6 months ago, Gartner 2020. So we've got to figure out how to get your organizations embracing it. And to me, finance and accounting is where RPA should start within the organization. And I'd say about 80 to 90% of the projects that where we engage start in the finance and accounting realm and then start to branch out from there. So what are some of the benefits that we derive from RPA? We've talked about some of these already in terms of productivity. We see reduced costs. Bots can churn through thousands of transactions in the time it takes a human to do a single transaction. Cycle time. I had a client a couple of years ago that had a report that took hours to create. And unfortunately, this report had to be filed with a regulatory body by like 10 o'clock every morning. So they were having people come in early, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning to start working on this report. Now that report's fully automated and is produced before 6 o'clock in the morning, ready for a manager to review and approve. And then the bot uploads the report first thing in the morning. Cycle time's essentially 0 on that now. It's almost 0. Quality, let's face it, we as humans, when we get toward the end of our day, when we feel rushed, when we have a deadline to hit, we'll make keystroke mistakes. We'll make copy paste mistakes. We'll take shortcuts in our work. Bots don't do that. They will do the same work over and over and over again, and they'll perform the calculations correctly. They don't make typos. You'll get increased control because bots always follow the instructions and they document their work so that you can see the work that they've performed. It's available to an auditor. And again, they always follow the written procedure. They don't take shortcuts. I love RPA because it provides organizations with a fast route to analytics. A lot of people tell me when I ask them, why aren't they using a certain kind of analytics within their finance domain? They'll say, well, it takes too long to get the data. By the time we get the data together and it's clean, it's already outdated. And so it's of not as much value to us. Using the bots just to go out and get the data and blend it and normalize it and prepare it is a great way to get you on the road to analytics. We talk about employee satisfaction. Another thing so I'm not going to belabor that. Another thing that I haven't mentioned is it's a platform for scale. A lot of organizations today are taking this mindset that I call automation first mindset of saying, if I'm going to build up a process, if I'm going to build up something, a new function within my group, I'm going to start with an automation first mindset so that I can automate as much as I can from day one. And then I can scale my organization without having to scale my workforce. And I become more and more competitive as I go on, because it doesn't matter if I double my revenue, I'm not having to double my workforce to support that revenue. So it's a great platform for scale. So how do we identify what's a good process for automation? I always advise, let's look for processes that are performed in high quantities, repetitive rules-based tasks, lots of volume. If you're filing, if you're a single person working on your own and it takes you 15 minutes to do your books at the end of the quarter, well, you probably don't need a bot for that. But if you're performing dozens or hundreds or thousands of transactions a day, a week, a month, and you've got several people performing that task, you should look at it as a candidate for RPA. If it's rules-based, look at it as a candidate for RPA. And these rules can be very complex. We have automations that ask literally hundreds of questions along the way. If this, then that, looking at various conditions, but they do follow basic rules. You also want to look for processes that are relatively stable. If your organization is changing that process every week, every month, even every quarter, you may want to look elsewhere or start to stabilize that process before you look to automate it. Within your organization, here's a polling question. What processes do you think are good process candidates for automation? Things that follow those basic guidelines that I provided before. What do you think? Account reconciliations, cash application, reports, something else? Take a few seconds here to complete your poll, and then I'm going to show you not only your results, but then we're going to talk about what we see out there broadly. A couple more seconds. All right, a good mix here. So as you can see, about a quarter of you said account reconciliations, cash application. I'm seeing a huge uptick in cash application. Just, you know, automated downloading of bank information and then applying that to AR to free up your working capital. Report generation has the lead, and that's great. There's some great utilities that we can field for you that will automate report generation, report processing, and the like. Let's take a look at some of the data that McKinsey put together a while back on how processes within finance and accounting that are automatable. Why do we start in finance and accounting? A ton of the processes are very automatable. You think about the transactional work that you do. It's very rules based. It's very high in volume. And McKinsey showed, where you see in the dark bars here, fully automatable processes or highly automatable processes. A ton of work within finance and accounting that lends itself to automation in general, and certainly within robotic process automation. Let's drill down in some of these areas. Again, general ledger account reconciliations, great place to start. I have clients that spend tens of thousands of hours a year on general ledger account reconciliations at period end close. We fielded a solution that's taken out tens of thousands of those hours, going from taking organizations from say 30, 40, 50% automated recs to 95, almost 100% complete automation of their general ledger account recs. Bank recs, again, have helped field solutions where organizations had 2, 3, 4 people that were doing nothing but trying to figure out how to apply its cash, working with bank files and the like, bank reports. very automatable. Automate your journal entries in your intercompany, another great area to start. I can't go through this entire list, but I encourage you to use this. This will be posted for you for your consumption. This is my menu of where to start. Take a look at this list. Are you burning lots of hours, or are you burning cycle time, or having quality errors or issues in any of these areas? Start with them as your hit list of a way to start. And it doesn't have to start in finance and accounting. Again, it could start in human resources, might be your organization's pain point. Getting information for onboarding or offboarding employees. It could start in IT. Getting people access to systems or reports that they need or what have you. But finance and accounting, to me, it's a no-brainer. Start with finance and accounting. Look at these processes. They're highly automatable. We've talked about a lot of the positives. Let's talk a little bit about why some automation programs fail. And I'll tell you that we as a firm do a number of recovery efforts for firms that have started in RPA, but then got stuck. And I see them getting stuck for a few different reasons, and we'll talk through those. One, sometimes they bite off more than they can chew. They pick a process that's too big, that's too complex, that might involve more human intuition that they realize on the surface. This can become problematic. I advise clients to go with quick wins. Start with a small task that's done in high volume, and then spiral out from there. Add on to that process on the front end or the back end. Pick something with measurable benefits. Some organizations pick automations that are so simple to automate and have very little return on their investment, very little in measurable benefit. And so while they get excited that they got a quote unquote quick win, when they try to articulate the benefits back to the organization, senior management kind of takes a ho-hum attitude toward it. So you want to make sure that you're automating something right out of the gate that has measurable benefit. Design is a huge issue. Don't just replicate the human way, but try to take that robot way that we talked about earlier, of where we're thinking through how would this process, let's start with the outcome in mind, and how can I have the robot perform the process in a new and innovative and efficient way that lends itself to efficiency with less maintenance, with less care and feeding, if you will. You want to make sure that you have plenty of process backlog, and that the backlog balances with the investments you make. You don't want to come out of the gate buying dozens and dozens of bots and automation potential, but not have a number of processes already identified to do it. I will say it's better to start small with a couple of bots and a basic roadmap of, say, 5 or 6 automations that you want to tackle. And then as you develop organizational confidence, develop a bigger backlog, and then start to make those investments so that they're in lockstep order, keeping your investments and your backlog synchronized. And then again, not getting the right people involved. It's one thing if you want to start it off as a pet project somewhere in the middle of the organization. I've seen many organizations do that. But in order to really embrace it, you want to get a senior executive sponsor, or a few executive sponsors, or an executive steering committee that's involved to really help direct how the organization decides, what am I going to automate? How am I going to automate it? How am I going to build an automation center of excellence in order to succeed? Our philosophy toward automation is very pragmatic and practical, as I mentioned. I see the best way of getting long-term success is starting with some quick wins, build some capability internally, build some confidence within your own teams on how they identify processes and the partner that they might be working with to deliver their automations. If you can, if there's a pre-built solution, like one of the ones that I've mentioned before, where somebody comes to the table with something that's already built and can be configured within a few days or a few weeks, use that. The savings from that will fund your future development. And then you can start to make tailor-made solutions. Or if you have a particularly painful and costly process that you need a tailor-made solution, okay, start with that. but again, break it into components. Focus on business outcomes. If anybody talks to you about RPA like it's a technology program, if your IT manager, your CIO is the one leading the effort on RPA, I question that. You need to have, this needs to be a business-led initiative where we're thinking about business outcomes that we're trying to achieve. We want faster reconciliations. We want to apply our cash faster. We want reduced cycle time. We want to reduce the number of people doing transactional work and get them focused on providing those business insights that we talked about earlier. It really needs to be focused on business outcomes. Again, a few things as far as our philosophy goes. Design is important. Spend a little time up front making sure that your process is consistent and that you can automate as much of the given process. Having as, you know, it's okay to have processes that have some exceptions that you hand off to humans. We have human in the loop solutions all the time, but you don't want to build a process that's going to only automate, say, 5% of the transactions. You want to look at some means by which you can design so that you can automate as many of the transactions as possible, handing off a smaller percentage of exceptions to the humans for their work. Again, build the robot way, and I can talk to you offline about, you know, the details behind what's behind that. Make sure that your data is ready. And if your data isn't ready, think about how you could use bots to get your data ready, or how you could use data blending tools like Alteryx to make sure that your data is clean, is accurate, is available so that your bots are working optimally. And then again, think about how automation is going to impact your group and how their work is going to change and how they should be thinking about their work differently so that they adopt these processes and these technologies as they move forward. Some ways that you can look toward your partner to help. Some consultancies will do end-to-end solutions. So I have this problem, I want to automate this process from end to end. That's certainly something that you could use some help with. Developing an automation roadmap, looking at that candidate list of processes and qualifying those, figure out what 10 or 15 or 20 processes should I prioritize over the course of the next 6 months or a year to automate. How do I optimize my process so that my automations are achievable? How do I document my processes, and how do I train my developers so that they're good at doing what they do? And adopting leading practices, creating a center of excellence around automation within your organization so that you have a center of gravity for taking these kinds of opportunities and having them look at it, measure it, weigh it, and figure out a plan to automate. We certainly help with that. You want to make sure that your partner is capable of doing those. I talked earlier about pre-built solutions versus tailor-made. If you can find a pre-built solution that will accelerate your development, I highly encourage you to do it. We've looked at and have adopted a number of pre-builts around cash application, around general ledger account reconciliation. Our GRC practice is using RPA for doing control testing and the like. And it's a product called RGP Power Audit. Reporting, y'all talked about reporting. We have reporting engines that can help automate AP processing, invoice recognition, things like that. Again, pre-built solutions that may fit into your business and be able to be configured within weeks as opposed to months for development. But if you need tailor-made solutions, look for a partner that has functional expertise, the technical depth, not only for the RPA platform, but that can work with the various systems with which the robots are going to interact, ones that will be able to bring you process excellence. And again, if necessary, in certain industries, it's paramount to have industry experience. I have some insurance clients where insurance information, say experience within the insurance industry is of paramount importance when designing a solution. Financial services the same way. So if you need that industry expertise, look for a partner that can do that. I really want to thank everybody for the time today. I'm going to open it up for the chat. I don't know whether we have anything in chat, but we've saved some time at the end to make sure that we can address any questions that you have. I'm looking to see if I can see the chat window.
Can you see it, Andy?
I cannot see it right now, and I don't know why. Rather than making people pause too much, I might ask you.
Someone is asking, can you please talk about ML and RPA?
Sure. So, you know, again, I think that these converging technologies that will, we're going to see more use of more and more as we go on. An easy one, an easy convergence here is, you know, let's take character recognition, for example. There's a number of machine learning tools that are already built and available for you to use at the transaction level or on a subscription level that you can use to improve your ability to do OCR work, for example. And now intelligent character recognition. I've got a client that I think in the next month or so, we're going to start to do handwriting analysis on some of their inventory forms to be able to use machine learning, because not everybody in the warehouse, like, let's face it, has access to a computer or can type out the answers. And until we can get the information in a pure digital form, I believe that these machine learning algorithms are such that you can use them for character recognition as long as the characters are reasonably legible. Other forms of machine learning that are there, fraud detection and prevention. Organizations are using bots in conjunction with pulling transactions, doing a quick screen, identifying transactions that look like they could be potentially fraudulent, and then pushing the data from those into machine learning algorithms that have been built to help, again, very quickly identify whether that's a candidate for fraud, for example. So the bots working in tandem with machine learning. Did that help? I hope. There's a bunch of different things out there, and I'm happy to send you articles on the side if anybody wants to send me their contact information. Other questions? I still can't see the chat window.
I'm watching it, Andy. I don't see anything else yet.
Okay.
Hang on.
Couple more minutes.
Hi, Andy, can you hear me?
I can.
There's a question on contract compliance testing.
Okay. Could you give me a little bit more insight into the question? I want to make sure that I'm answering the intent of the question.
That's the question.
Okay. So a couple different ways that bots employed, and then also analytic process automation and things around that realm, where people have used bots to abstract contracts, pull key terms out, and then looking at transactions and reports and the like to ensure that a given contract is being, is in compliance. So in other words, did they use the right pricing? Are they buying things, with the right terms in conjunction with a master agreement, for example? Again, anytime you're reconciling different data sources, I think bots and other forms of automation are great ways to, offload that to a digital worker. I hope that answered the question. It was, if whoever submitted that could be a little bit more specific, I'd be happy.
Andy, I'm seeing another question. Is there any difference between ML and deep learning?
Well, boy, I've got a data scientist that works with us that would probably be able to answer that question in about an hour, or he might be able to answer it in 5 seconds. I would say that, I use the terms interchangeably, and that may be erroneous. From my perspective, I'm more focused on the business outcome. I look at deep learning as using neural network type machine learning algorithms. And again, I know that some even disagree with the use of the term algorithm when it comes to machine learning, because the machine learning is more about pattern recognition. I would say that the difference isn't important when it comes to a business perspective, certainly within finance and accounting. If you know what problem you're trying to solve, we can figure out the type of engine that you might need, and whether it's a neural network type thing, computer vision, things like that, or whether it's some other kind of data set that we would leverage to answer that problem. But I'm not the guy really to answer that. I apologize.
And Andy, Joshua has a question. What are the top 3 FPA most successful RPA projects you've seen completed or have implemented yourself?
Okay, so for an FP&A, that's an interesting space. Most of what I see, and I'm going to be honest here, in the FP&A space is more on purpose platforms. So anything from like a Hyperion to a OneStream to something like that. But where we're seeing RPA working and where we've seen it deployed very effectively is on the front end. Let's say you don't have integration to all your systems, and so the FP&A system isn't able to get all the data naturally that it would need in order for you to do the analysis. Use robots to pull in from those systems that may not be fully integrated. That's a great place to start. And also to pick up from those purpose-built platforms and then use the data, transform the data, and get that into the hands of the people that need it. So what I'd call back-end integration. But FP&A, to be honest, I see more automation outside RPA than using RPA there. I'm seeing much more RPA use in the general accounting where there's a lot more transactional work.
I don't see anyone else. No more questions in the chat.
Well, I'm happy to stick around, and I think my contact information was up there for y'all. So if anybody thinks of any questions when you get off, or if I did an inadequate job in answering your question, please feel free to pop me a note. I'd be more than happy to help. And again, I think this recording and the materials will be posted. Well, will they not, Denise?
They will go. They'll be posted on our website, as will a link to the recording.
Fantastic. Well, thank everybody for attending, and thank you, Denise, for hosting me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for coming, everybody. Have a good afternoon.
Be well.